It's amazing how much this idea of mindset pops up everywhere in mindset. Like we've talked about, that affects relationships, how we parent, education, work. It really feels like our mindset shapes just about everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. That's what's so powerful about Dweck's book.
Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Oh, such a good one.
Yeah, it's all about how our beliefs can really shape our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about how we see our talents and abilities,
Yeah.
right? Whether we think those are fixed or if they can grow and change over time.
Right, and she calls these, mindsets, obviously.
Makes sense. And I think what makes mindset so interesting is that Dweck, she's got all this research backing up her ideas, like decades of research. And, she uses tons of real life stories and examples. She's not just throwing out theories.
Right, so just to get everyone on the same page, can we define mindset real quick? Like, what exactly are we talking about here?
Sure. So like we said, it all boils down to whether you think qualities like intelligence are fixed.
So they can't change.
Yeah, basically. Or if you believe, like Dweck argues, that those qualities can be developed, that they can grow.
I see. So, you could either believe you're stuck with a certain level of intelligence, or you could believe that you can get smarter through hard work and learning.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. It turns out that this seemingly simple belief, this mindset thing, can have a huge impact on how our lives turn out.
Huge E. And it really hit me when I read that anecdote early in the book about the kids solving puzzles.
Oh, yeah. What was it? Some kids just totally shut down when things got hard.
Yeah. But some kids, they just thrived on those challenges. You'd think it was just a matter of who was smarter.
Right. I would think that too. But what Dweck found was that it wasn't really about ability.
So what was it about?
It all boiled down to how those kids view the struggle.
So mindset again.
Yeah. The kids who got excited by the challenge, who saw it as an opportunity to learn, they were the ones with the growth mindset. They weren't afraid to screw up.
Because they saw those screw-ups as part of the learning process, right?
Exactly. To them, mistakes weren't failures. They were like, okay, I learned something, bring on the next challenge.
And then you had those other kids who were terrified of challenge, or they just wanted to avoid them at all costs.
Right. They had that fixed mindset thing going on. They were so worried about looking dumb, so they wouldn't even risk trying something if they weren't sure they'd be good at it.
Because to them, looking dumb meant they weren't actually smart, right?
Exactly. And that fear of looking stupid, it really held them back from learning and growing.
So we're seeing how this whole mindset thing matters, but I'm thinking not everything in life is like a kid's puzzle. How does this play out in real life, the grown-up world?
Well, Dweck's research goes way beyond puzzles. She shows how these mindsets play out in all sorts of real-life situations. I mean, think about this. You're in your 20s. You get, C+ on a midterm.
Been there.
Then, bam, parking ticket. And to top it off, your best friend's not returning your calls.
Talk about a bad day.
Yeah, triple whammy. How would you react to that?
Okay, honestly, I'd probably go into a full-blown tailspin. That C+ would become proof I'm not smart enough. Then the parking ticket just piles on the feeling of being a total failure. And then, my friend ignoring me. That just feels like rejection on top of everything else.
That's totally a fixed mindset reaction. But think about it this way. Someone with a growth mindset might have the exact same experiences, but see them completely differently.
Oh, so instead of feeling like a failure, what would they do?
Well, they might use that C+ to, analyze their study habits. The parking ticket could be a wake-up call to be more mindful. And maybe, just maybe, their friend is just having a rough day. It's the same stuff happening, but it's not the end of the world.
I see what you mean. Our mindset really colors our whole perception of what's going on. It's like seeing things through different lenses.
Right, exactly. A growth mindset can make us see challenges as chances to learn and grow, not just as signs that we're not good enough.
That makes sense. I like that. Okay, so we know mindsets matter. But what about natural talent? Don't some people just have a gift for certain things? Where does that fit in?
Oh, the age-old nature versus nurture debate. And Dweck dives right into it. She doesn't say natural talent doesn't exist, but she really challenges this idea that talent alone is enough. She uses all sorts of examples to debunk that myth.
Okay, hit me with an example. I need to see this in action.
Let's take John McEnroe, the tennis guy. He was so talented, but he really believed that talent was all it took. He didn't see the need to push himself to keep improving his game.
So he basically coasted on his talent.
He did.
Yeah.
And yeah, he achieved a lot, but he himself has said that he didn't reach his full potential.
Why not?
Because of his fixed mindset. He didn't embrace the tough stuff, the constant learning that you need to really master something.
So even with talent, you can hit a wall if you've got a fixed mindset.
Totally. And that's so different from, say, Michael Jordan. He was called a natural too, but he was famous for his work ethic, his drive to always get better, always pushing himself, embracing new challenges.
So Jordan had that growth mindset.
Big time. And that mindset took his talent and amplified it. It helped him become a legend.
So what you're saying is, even if you're not a natural, a growth mindset can help you do amazing things. But if you are naturally gifted, a fixed mindset can actually hold you back. It's about your approach, not just what you're born with.
Exactly. It's all about how you see your abilities. And that brings up something else that Dweck talks about. The way we praise kids can either encourage a growth mindset or, well, reinforce a fixed mindset.
Are you saying there's a wrong way to praise kids?
It might not be wrong, but it can definitely be less effective. You know, it's interesting because praising kids for being smart can actually backfire.
Huh, really? But don't kids need to know they're smart?
Of course they do.
Oh.
But here's the thing. When we're always telling kids, you're so smart, we might be accidentally making them afraid to fail.
Why would that be?
Because they start to think, if I mess up, maybe I'm not actually smart after all. So they avoid anything that might make them look less intelligent.
Wow, that's really counterintuitive.
It is. And that fear, it stops them from really taking risks and learning and growing.
So what's the best way to praise kids if we want to foster a growth mindset?
Dweck talks about praising the process, not the person. So instead of saying, you're so smart, you might say, wow, you really stuck with that problem and figured it out. Or, I'm impressed by how much effort you put into that project.
Ah. So you're encouraging kids to focus on their actions and how much effort they put in, not just on a fixed label.
Right. And this idea also applies to criticism. Dweck says good criticism helps the kid improve, not just labels them.
So instead of telling a kid, you're so careless, you could say, hey, let's look at these mistakes together and see if we can find a pattern. Maybe we can figure out a strategy so they don't happen again.
That's it. It's about helping them develop their skills and learn from those mistakes, not just feeling bad about themselves.
This is fascinating. Now, Dweck doesn't just look at mindsets and individuals, right? She talks about relationships too.
Oh, for sure. And it gets even more interesting when you think about how fixed mindsets can really mess up relationships.
Oh, yeah, I can relate to that. I've definitely been in relationships where it felt like we were both stuck in that fixed mindset.
It's a trap. Dweck says it leads to a lot of blame and judgment and this idea that if you're really compatible, everything should just magically work out, like zero effort.
But relationships take work and good communication and being willing to grow together, right?
Absolutely. And a growth mindset is key. Dweck has some really sad examples of relationships where those fixed mindsets caused a ton of conflict and ultimately led to breakups. Like, remember that story about the couple who were so in love but just had totally different communication styles?
Yeah, the guy needed a lot of space and quiet time, but his partner thrived on constant communication and like tons of affection.
And because they both had fixed mindsets, they saw those differences as like fundamental incompatibilities instead of an opportunity to figure out how to meet each other's needs and adapt.
That's really sad. They loved each other, but their mindsets wouldn't let them build a good relationship.
Exactly. Dweck contrasts those stories with couples who approach relationships with a growth mindset. They see the tough stuff as a chance to learn and grow together. They know relationships take work, and they're willing to put in the effort.
So even in love, your mindset makes a huge difference.
Totally. And this goes for all kinds of relationships, not just romantic ones, friendships, families, even at work. A growth mindset makes you approach all those connections with curiosity and empathy and, a willingness to learn and grow alongside other people.
This is all making so much sense. But here's the thing. Dweck doesn't just tell us about these mindsets and then leave us hanging, right? She actually gives us suggestions for how to shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Yes. That's what's so great about her work. It's not just theory. It's like she gives us actual tools to change our thinking.
Love it. Give me the rundown. What's step one?
First, you've got to be able to recognize when you're having those fixed mindset thoughts, like becoming aware of those voices in your head that are all about self-doubt and judgment.
So that little voice that's always telling you you're not good enough?
That's the one. We all have that voice. But the key is not letting it control us.
How do we stop it?
Dweck says we need to challenge those fixed mindset thoughts. Like, ask yourself, is this thought really true? Or is there another way to look at this situation?
So it's not ignoring those thoughts, but like actively questioning them.
Exactly. And by doing that, you can start to see challenges as opportunities for growth, not reasons to just give up.
That's a good way to look at it. So you're basically turning failures into chances to learn.
That's the power of the growth mindset. And Dweck also talks about focusing on effort and learning, not just on proving how capable you are. It goes back to that idea of praising the process, not the person.
So you're not just focused on the end result, you're enjoying the journey of learning and improving.
Exactly. That shift in focus can make a huge difference in how motivated and resilient you are, and it can really help you succeed in the long run.
This is all great stuff, but I'm thinking this journey to a true growth mindset, it's probably not a one-time thing, right? It's got to be an ongoing process.
You're absolutely right. It's a continuous process of noticing when you're falling into fixed mindset patterns and challenging yourself to think differently.
What about those times when we inevitably slip back into that fixed mindset? How do we deal with that?
Dweck's got us covered there too. She says, we need to accept that we all have a mix of fixed and growth mindsets. It's not about being perfectly growth-minded all the time. It's about having the awareness to recognize when those fixed mindset thoughts are popping up and then using the tools to deal with them.
This is so interesting. So how do we handle it when we catch ourselves slipping back?
Dweck suggests something pretty cool. She says, try to identify and name your fixed mindset persona. Literally give it a name.
That's a fun idea.
It is. Think of it as giving that negative voice a face and a personality. It can make it easier to see those fixed mindset thoughts for what they are.
That makes sense. So instead of just feeling bad about those negative thoughts, you're giving them a form, like a character you can actually deal with.
Yeah. And then Dweck says, try to educate that persona. Instead of battling those fixed mindset thoughts, you're engaging with them in a way that's more compassionate and understanding.
That's a really cool idea. It's like inviting those parts of ourselves to come along on the journey to a growth mindset, not seeing them as the enemy.
I love that. And that's the beauty of this whole thing. It's a constant process of learning and growing and being kinder to ourselves and to others.
This is so insightful, but I gotta know, how do we actually start putting this growth mindset stuff into action? Where do we begin?
Dweck's got some really practical tips for that. And the good news is, it doesn't require some huge personality overhaul. It's about making small, gradual changes to your thinking and behavior.
So baby steps can lead to big changes.
Exactly. She says pick an area in your life where you want to see improvement. Could be your personal life, your work, anything really.
Okay, I'm thinking about how much I avoid tucking on new projects at work because, well, honestly, I'm terrified of failing.
That's a great starting point. And a small step could be volunteering for a task that's just a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Something that feels like a challenge, but not totally overwhelming.
So baby steps towards growth.
You got it.
Yeah.
And as you gain confidence, you can slowly stretch yourself even further.
This is so inspiring. I'm seeing how this growth mindset stuff can really apply to, well, everything.
It really can. Dweck talks about how it impacts our relationships, how we parent, how we learn, our careers. It really is like this invisible force that's shaping our choices and our experiences.
And once you're aware of it, you can harness that force for good. You can choose to adopt a growth mindset, even if you've been operating from a fixed mindset for a long time.
It's never too late to make that shift. Dweck lays out this whole roadmap for how to do it. She talks about recognizing those fixed mindset thoughts and challenging them. She encourages us to embrace those challenges, to see effort as the way to get better at things, and to focus on learning and growth instead of just trying to prove ourselves.
This is all great, but honestly, there's so much more to mindset. We've only just touched on the basics.
You're right, we've just laid the groundwork. There's still so much more to explore. Welcome back. Ready to dig a little deeper into mindset.
Absolutely. Last time we talked about the whole fixed mindset versus growth mindset thing and how that impacts, how we deal with challenges, how we see the world, our relationships, everything really. But I'm wondering, how does mindset get into the nitty-gritty of putting these ideas into practice, in specific areas of life?
Well, that's one of the things I really love about Dweck's work. She doesn't just leave us hanging with these big concepts. She gives real-world examples, tons of them, and actionable strategies. There's a whole chapter dedicated to how parents, teachers, and coaches, how they influence kids' mindsets. It's eye-opening.
I bet. And I'll admit, sometimes I catch myself praising kids for just being smart or talented. Like, oh, you're so good at this. It feels natural, right? Like you're boosting their confidence. But Dweck makes this really strong argument for why that might not be the best approach.
It's a really subtle thing, but it's so important. Praising kids for being smart, it can actually make them afraid of failing. They get so caught up in trying to keep that smart label that they avoid anything that might make them look, well, not so smart.
So they're basically protecting their ego, but it's actually holding them back from trying new things and, growing.
Exactly. And there's this really poignant story in Mindset about a little boy who always aced his tests, like 99th percentile kind of scores, but he struggled with self-esteem. Turns out his parents, who were both super smart themselves, they were constantly telling him how brilliant he was.
So all that praise backfired.
It did. The boy became terrified of doing anything challenging, anything where he might not succeed. He was so afraid of losing that smart label that he played it safe, avoided anything that might make him look not smart enough.
That's so sad. And it's a reminder that even when we have good intentions, we don't always get the results we're hoping for. So how do we avoid that? How do we praise kids in a way that actually encourages a growth mindset?
Dweck really stresses this idea of process praise. So instead of focusing on inherent qualities, we celebrate the effort, the strategies they use, their persistence, the improvement they made. Instead of you're so talented at drawing, you could say, I love how you use different shading techniques to make your picture look so real.
So you're shifting the focus from who they are to what they did.
Yeah, that subtle change can help kids see their abilities as something they have control over, something they can develop.
Love that. And it probably applies to criticism too, right? Like how we give feedback.
Totally. Constructive criticism can be super helpful for learning, but only if it's given with that growth mindset lens.
Yeah.
It's about focusing on the process, not attacking the person.
Okay, remember that example Dweck gives about the kid who's rushing through his homework, skipping questions, making careless mistakes, and his dad gets frustrated and says, this is your homework, can't you ever get it right? You're either dense or irresponsible. Which is it?
Oh, ouch. That's the fixed mindset in action. It's like saying the kid's shortcomings are permanent, that there's no hope for him to improve.
Yeah, it's harsh. So how would a parent with a growth mindset handle that?
Instead of all that blame, the dad could say something like, hey, I noticed you skipped a few questions and rushed through some of your answers. Want to take another look together? Maybe we could figure out where you got stuck or if there are any concepts you need to review.
It's such a different approach. It's like saying, I believe you can do better and I'm here to help.
Exactly. It's all about helping them develop those skills and learn from their mistakes, not just feeling bad about themselves. And here's another thing Dweck points out that's really important. It's not just what we say, it's how we act. Kids pick up on our attitudes, even when we don't say them out loud.
So we have to model that growth mindset ourselves.
We do. Like, if we're always saying, I'm terrible at math or I'm not a creative person, we're sending that fixed mindset message to everyone around us.
We're basically saying those abilities are fixed and can't change.
All right. And that can be so limiting.
This is making me think about all those times I've complained about being bad at something, like right in front of my kids. Yikes. Okay, shifting gears a bit. Dweck also did this fascinating research on the impact of mindsets on kids' grades. She followed a bunch of students as they went into junior high, that notoriously tough time for a lot of kids.
Oh, yeah. Middle school can be brutal. So what happened?
Well, some of the kids had a fixed mindset, and some had a growth mindset. Care to guess what went down?
Knowing what we know now, I'm guessing the growth mindset kids handled the transition better.
You got it. They actually saw all those new academic demands as opportunities to learn and grow.
And their grades.
They not only kept their grades up, they actually improved.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So their belief in their ability to learn actually made them better students.
It did. But sadly, the fixed mindset kids, their grades actually went down. They started seeing the challenges as proof that they weren't smart enough.
So their mindset became like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Wow. It's powerful stuff. This whole idea that our beliefs can actually shape our reality.
And that's what Dweck's research shows. When you believe you can grow, you put in more effort. You don't shy away from challenges. And, you keep going even when things get tough. And that leads to better results.
It's like a snowball effect. Believing you can learn makes you a better learner.
It really is. And it shows how powerful a growth mindset can be. Like, it unlocks all this potential you might not even know you have.
Okay, so we've got mindsets in school, but what about sports? Like, Isn't athletic ability mostly about natural talent?
That's what a lot of people think. But Dweck challenges that too. She's got these great examples from the sports world, showing how much mindset can impact performance, even in something as physical as athletics.
I'm ready for those sports analogies. Bring them on.
All right, so picture this. You've got Michael Jordan, obviously super talented, but he's also known for like this insane work ethic, always pushing himself to get better, never satisfied.
Never settling for good enough.
Never. Every practice, every game, it was a chance to learn and grow. Total growth mindset, always striving to be better, even when he was already at the top of his game.
Okay, now give me the contrast.
Well, take John McEnroe, another tennis superstar. He had the talent, but his mindset was fixed. He thought his natural ability was enough, didn't need to push himself as hard as Jordan.
So he kind of rested on his laurels.
Yeah, and it showed. He struggled with pressure and didn't reach the same level of long-term success that Jordan did.
It's a good reminder that mindset can actually matter more than talent, even in sports.
Exactly. And Dweck talks about another important growth mindset strategy for athletes: focusing on your personal best, not on comparing yourself to others.
This is making me think about Mia Hamm, the soccer player. I remember reading about how she was always pushing herself to improve, regardless of what other players were doing.
That's it. She knew it was all about mental toughness, but she didn't see that as something you were born with. It was a skill you could build through practice and, not giving up.
Yeah.
She believed that if you gave it your all, you were a winner, regardless of the score.
I love that. It's like you're competing against yourself, trying to be the best you can be, not getting caught up in what everyone else is doing.
Exactly. That's the core of a growth mindset. Focus on your own progress, celebrate your efforts, and keep striving to reach your potential.
This is so eye-opening. I'm starting to see how growth mindset can really apply to anything. But what about the business world? Does Dweck cover that?
Oh yeah. She dives into how mindsets play out in leadership, in teams, and even for entire companies. It gets super relevant for anyone working in a professional setting.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more. How does this mindset stuff impact the workplace?
One thing that really struck me was her analysis of, those leaders who have fixed mindsets. She says they're often obsessed with proving they're the best, even if it means putting others down to make themselves look good.
So it's like a scarcity mentality. They feel like they have to tear others down to build themselves up.
That's it. And she gives this example of Lee Iacocca, the CEO who turned Chrysler around. He was a hero at first, but then he got so obsessed with keeping that image of being a brilliant leader that he kind of neglected the company's long-term well-being.
It's like his fixed mindset made him prioritize short-term wins over actually building a sustainable, thriving business. Totally. And she contrasts this with leaders who have growth mindsets. They're all about developing their skills and their team skills. They see challenges as opportunities for learning and being innovative, and they create a culture where everyone is constantly trying to get better.
Okay, I need an example. Who's a good example of a growth mindset leader?
She talks about Jack Welch, who led General Electric. He was all about growth and development for himself and everyone at the company.
So he created this culture of learning.
Exactly. He believed that the best leaders are those who are constantly learning and adapting. And he made it okay for people to take risks, to mess up, to learn from their mistakes.
He understood that failure is a stepping stone to success, not the end of the world.
That's it. And he was also really focused on building strong teams. He knew that the best leaders don't try to do everything themselves. They surround themselves with talented people and create an environment where everyone can contribute.
It's all about collaboration, not competition. Totally. And Dweck argues that collaborative approach is like a signature of a growth mindset company. It's about building a culture where everyone feels valued and respected, where they're empowered to learn and grow.
I bet that kind of environment leads to much better results for the company, right?
Absolutely. When people feel supported and encouraged to develop, they're going to be more engaged, more motivated, and more creative. They're not afraid to try new things, which often leads to big breakthroughs.
Dweck's research on mindsets in the workplace is so relevant. It makes you realize how much our beliefs can shape a whole company's culture.
It's powerful stuff. And she even gives advice for how companies can shift to a more growth-oriented culture. It's all about promoting this belief that talent can be developed and giving people opportunities to learn and grow.
It makes sense. Investing in your people means investing in the success of your company.
Exactly. And Dweck has all these concrete examples of how companies can actually put these growth mindset principles into practice, from how they train their leaders to how they do performance reviews, focusing on development and improvement. not just judging people.
Okay, we've talked about mindsets in kids and school and sports and even work. But can you really change your mindset? Like, if you've always had a fixed mindset, is it even possible to shift to a growth mindset?
That's a great question, and Dweck is honest about it. Changing those deeply ingrained beliefs is tough, especially when those beliefs have been shaping you for years.
So it's not like you can just flip a switch.
It's not that simple. But Dweck does have some really insightful suggestions for how we can start to change our mindsets, even when it feels really hard.
I'm all ears. I'm realizing how much my fixed mindset has been holding me back, and I'm ready to embrace this growth mindset thing.
That's awesome. And the first step might sound a little counterintuitive, but it's to actually embrace your fixed mindset.
Wait, what? Embrace the very thing that's been holding me back.
It's about acknowledging that we all have parts of us that are fixed mindset-y. It's not about pretending that part doesn't exist. It's about understanding its influence and choosing not to let it call the shots.
So it's like being aware of it without letting it control us.
Yes. And remember that technique we talked about earlier, identifying and naming your fixed mindset persona.
Oh yeah, like giving that negative voice a name, right?
That's it. Like, remember that student who named hers Gertrude?
Yeah, Gertrude, the cagey, histrionic, and self-aggrandizing fixed mindset persona. It makes those negative thoughts a little less scary somehow.
Right. It's like giving them a face, a personality. And then, Dweck says, you can start to educate that persona.
Educate our inner Gertrude.
Exactly. You're engaging with those fixed mindset thoughts in a way that's, more understanding and compassionate. You're not just trying to make them go away. You're working with them.
It's like inviting those parts of ourselves to come along on the journey to a growth mindset.
Right.
Not treating them like the enemy.
I love that. And it really highlights how this whole journey is about constant learning and growing and being kinder to ourselves and others.
This idea of educating our fixed mindset really clicks for me. It feels a lot more empowering than just fighting those negative thoughts all the time.
It is. And Dweck also has lots of practical tips for how to start putting a growth mindset into action in your daily life. It's about taking small steps, focusing on progress, not perfection.
That's reassuring. It's not about making these huge changes all at once. It's about consistency and those little changes that add up over time.
Exactly. She says to pick one area where you want to improve. Could be anything. Your relationships, your work, and focus on making small, consistent changes.
Okay, let's say I'm someone who gets really defensive when someone gives me feedback. I know it's good for me, a chance to learn, but I still have that knee-jerk reaction to protect my ego.
That's a great example. A small step could be simply listening to the feedback without interrupting or arguing. Even if you don't agree with it at first, just focus on taking in the information and trying to see things from their perspective.
So I'm choosing a more open and receptive response instead of getting defensive right away.
Right. And Dweck says these small changes, if you keep doing them, can lead to big shifts in your mindset and eventually better results in your life.
It's like you're training your brain to think and react in a more growth-oriented way.
And she even gets into the science of it, talking about how our brains can actually change, based on our experiences. It's this concept called brain plasticity.
Wait, so every time we learn something new, our brains literally change?
It's true. And that's pretty empowering, right? It means we have the power to shape our own brains through what we choose to do, how we choose to think.
We're not stuck with the brain we were born with.
Exactly. And knowing that can be super motivating. When we believe we can grow and change, we're more likely to embrace challenges and stick with it when things get tough.
So we can change our own brains. But what about other people? Can we influence their mindsets? Can we, create a growth mindset environment?
That's another really cool thing Dweck talks about. She says it's important to create environments that support growth mindsets, whether it's at home, at school, at work, even in our communities.
So it's about surrounding ourselves with people who believe in growth and who encourage us to learn and improve.
Yes. And it's about actively challenging those fixed mindset beliefs, like celebrating effort and progress, not just results, making it safe to make mistakes and learn from them.
I'm imagining a world where everyone has a growth mindset. That would be amazing.
It would. And Dweck shows us that it's not just some fantasy. She gives these inspiring examples of schools that have put growth mindset programs in place, and they've seen a huge improvement in how motivated and engaged students are and how well they're doing academically.
What are those schools doing differently? What's their secret?
One key thing they do is teach kids about their brains and how they grow through learning. Dweck actually developed a program called Brainology that uses all kinds of fun stuff, videos, games, to help kids understand how their brains work and how they can help them grow.
So they're basically empowering kids to understand and take control of their own learning.
That's it. And it works. The kids who participated in Brainology, their math grades got way better, and they were more likely to see challenges as opportunities to learn, not as threats.
It's amazing how these small changes in our beliefs can lead to such big results.
And Dweck's own story is a great example of that. She admits that she used to have a pretty fixed mindset herself, especially when it came to her intelligence.
Wait, seriously, the growth mindset guru used to struggle with a fixed mindset. That's actually really encouraging to hear.
It is. It makes her message so much more real. She's not saying she has it all figured out. She's just sharing what she's learned along the way. So how did she make that shift? She talks about how her own research actually changed her thinking. She started taking on more challenges, seeing mistakes as opportunities to learn, focusing on effort and progress, not just proving how smart she was.
Her work literally changed her life.
It did. And that change helped her achieve more, take more risks, and feel more fulfilled in her work and her relationships.
It's never too late to embrace that growth mindset.
Never. And remember, a growth mindset is about accepting that we're all works in progress. It's not about being perfect, it's about being open to learning and growing.
I love that. It takes all the pressure off having to be perfect all the time.
Dweck even talks about how she's learned to appreciate her own flaws and see them as part of what makes her, well, her.
Instead of seeing flaws as weaknesses, we can see them as part of what makes each of us unique.
Exactly. And she argues that when we embrace our imperfections, we become more compassionate towards ourselves and others.
That's beautiful. Okay, this is all great. But what about those times when things just don't go our way? When we face setbacks and challenges? How does a growth mindset help us deal with those tough times?
Dweck's got some great advice for those moments too. It's all about seeing those setbacks as opportunities for learning, as chances to bounce back even stronger.
So instead of letting a setback define us, we use it as fuel for growth.
That's it. One thing she suggests is to ask yourself different questions when you hit a roadblock. Like instead of, why am I so bad at this? Try asking, what can I learn from this? What can I try differently next time?
Those kinds of questions shift our focus from beating ourselves up to actually finding solutions.
Right. And she also reminds us how important it is to ask for help and feedback from others. When we're struggling, it's so important to have people in our corner, people who believe in us and can give us guidance and support.
It's like having your own personal cheerleading squad. People who remind us that we can do it even when we're doubting ourselves.
Exactly. And even though it can be hard, seeking feedback, even the critical kind, is so important for growth. It helps us identify blind spots and see our strengths and weaknesses more clearly.
I think the biggest takeaway from mindset is that growth is a choice. It's not something that just happens. It's something we create through our beliefs, our actions, and how we interact with the people around us.
Dweck's book is like a call to action. She challenges us to examine our own mindsets, to embrace the power of growth, and to create a world where everyone feels like they can learn and reach their full potential.
Wow. This deep dive has been incredible. I'm seeing how these concepts can impact every part of my life, from my relationships to my work, even how I see myself.
Me too. And there's so much more to mindset, so many more great stories and practical tips. I highly recommend checking it out and exploring these ideas further.
I'm definitely adding it to my reading list. But for now, I'm excited to hear what else Dweck has to share in the rest of the book. What's coming up in the next part of our deep dive? It's amazing how much this idea of mindset pops up everywhere in mindset. Like we've talked about, that affects relationships, how we parent, education, work. It really feels like our mindset shapes just about everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. That's what's so powerful about Dweck's book. She's not just talking about some abstract theory. She's giving us real-world examples, practical strategies, a framework for actually understanding how much our beliefs influence our actions and ultimately what we achieve in life.
I keep coming back to that story about the Martins and their 3-year-old son, Robert. Remember? They were totally convinced he was a genius, like constantly boasting about all his accomplishments.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And then when Robert didn't get into that super exclusive preschool in New York, their whole attitude toward him just shifted.
It was a complete 180. Such a clear example of how a fixed mindset can mess things up, even in our most important relationships. The Martins had unintentionally made Robert's worth all about his achievements.
So when he didn't meet their expectations, it's like they withdrew their love and support.
Yeah, which is so damaging, especially for a young child. It really highlights how important it is to love and value kids for who they are, not just for what they achieve.
We need to create environments where it's safe to make mistakes, where kids can try new things and learn without being afraid of being judged. And I think that applies to more than just parenting. It's how we should approach all our relationships, really.
Definitely. And speaking of those fixed mindset traps, Dweck also talks about this fascinating concept called self-handicapping. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, it rings a bell. Isn't that where you basically create obstacles for yourself so you have an excuse if you fail?
That's it. It's like this subconscious way of protecting your ego, avoiding the risk of putting in the effort, and then maybe not being good enough. Remember that example in the book about the student who would procrastinate on studying for his exams?
Oh, yeah. So if he got a bad grade, he could blame it on not studying enough instead of maybe admitting he didn't really grasp the material.
Exactly. It's amazing how much our fear of failure can hold us back. Sometimes we'd rather protect our egos than risk putting ourselves out there and potentially falling short.
It's like we're playing it safe to avoid looking not smart.
Right. And that's where a growth mindset can be so powerful. It helps us embrace challenges and see effort as the path to becoming better, to mastering something.
It's like choosing courage over comfort, right?
It is. Instead of avoiding challenges, you lean into them, knowing that even if you stumble, you'll learn and grow from the experience.
This reminds me of Jim Marshall, the football player for the Minnesota Vikings. He made that really famous blunder, I think it was back in the 60s.
I think I remember that. Didn't he run the wrong way?
He did. Picked up a fumble and ran it all the way to the wrong end zone, scoring a touchdown for the other team.
Oh man, I can only imagine how awful he must have felt.
It was a moment that could have totally destroyed his confidence, but Marshall didn't let it define him.
He owned up to the mistake, learned from it, and continued to have a really successful career.
He had that growth mindset. He saw it as a learning opportunity, not a career-ending failure.
Exactly. And that leads us to another really inspiring part of mindset. The emphasis on lifelong learning. It's not just about reaching a certain level of success. It's about always being curious, always being open to new challenges, and always pushing yourself to learn and grow.
That idea really resonates with me. It's like you never want to get complacent. Always keep striving to learn new things and expand your horizons.
Dweck shares some of her own experiences with this too. She talks about how she's continued to learn and grow throughout her life and her career. And she really embodies this growth mindset in everything she does.
She walks the walk. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with mindset. We've talked about relationships, parenting, education, sports, even the business world. But I think the biggest question for our listeners is, how do we actually take all this amazing information and use it in our own lives? Like, how do we make that shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Well, I think one of the most important takeaways is that our mindsets aren't fixed. They can change. Even if you've had a fixed mindset for a long time, you can choose to adopt a growth mindset. It takes effort, but it's totally possible.
That's so encouraging. It's empowering to know that we have the power to change our thinking and, ultimately change our lives.
It is. And Dweck gives us some really practical strategies for making that shift. We talked about becoming aware of those fixed mindset thoughts, challenging them, embracing challenges, focusing on effort, all that good stuff.
It's like a whole new way of looking at yourself in the world.
It is. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, times when you fall back into old patterns, but that's okay. With a growth mindset, you see those setbacks as opportunities for learning and keep moving forward.
This deep dive into mindset has been incredibly insightful and inspiring. It's a book that's full of wisdom and practical advice. I think it has the potential to change how we approach everything, our work, our relationships, even how we see ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of those books that stays with you. And I think the most powerful message is that growth is always possible, no matter who you are or where you're starting from.
That's a great way to sum it up. And on that note, we want to leave you with one final question to ponder. Think about an area in your life where you've held yourself back because you were afraid of failing. How might a growth mindset help you approach that situation differently? We encourage you to explore that question and see where it takes you. Until next time, happy learning.